The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Emmanuel Macron, President of the French Republic. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Monsieur le Président.
President of the General Assembly, heads of state and government, ministers, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen. I'm speaking here on behalf of a country who will never forget what nations are capable of doing when they are united. Freedom. And France has just paid tribute indeed this year to the peoples of America, Europe, Africa, Asia and Oceania, who allowed us to liberate ourselves from the Nazi grip. Progress and peace also. France, with its peoples, have created a community of free states, sovereign states, able to engage with each other and to understand what is essential. Also, hope. Much like we've seen in recent times during the Paralympic and Olympic Games that France hosted this year, with beauty, enthusiasm and the support of peoples. However, despite this, the Olympic truce that we wanted here did not come to life. However, the danger of words without action and impotent diplomacy are before us every day. However, our organisation is facing the biggest convergence of crisis possibly ever after its 8 decades of existence. And the feeling of a loss of control is growing when faced with wars, with climate change, increasing inequality, injustice. And every day humanity seems to be more fragmented at a time when the circumstances would require us to find common responses, strong, effective responses. These 2 words, United Nations, need to embody hope once again. And what must we do for this? We need to find this essential bedrock of this, and that's what I wanted to touch on briefly. Above all, first and foremost, we need to restore the terms of trust and respect between peoples. And here I can see them often trampled in our debates. To do this, we need to pay equal attention to those who are suffering. As I mentioned here 2 years ago, in fact. Let's stave off the possibility of having double standards. One life is equal to another. The civilian protection is an imperative norm and must remain our North Star at a time when this year we are marking the 75th anniversary of the Geneva Conventions. And let's not let the idea take root for a moment that those who died in Ukraine are from the north, that those who have died in Gaza are from the south, and those who die in the conflicts in Sudan in the Great Lakes region or in Myanmar would be those who've consequences, who are alone and ignored. Let's regain control and restore this confidence and trust, which means that we should look for peace everywhere and not accept any differences at a time, or indifference at a time when human lives are at stake. Let's not accept any difference being made when territorial integrity and the sovereignty of states is at stake either. These conflicts today call into question our very capacity to ensure that our UN Charter is respected. And when I see some people want to propose peace by asking for capitulation, it's surprising. We can't even, how can we could support any idea like this? I would like to reiterate here how the protection of civilians, of all humanitarian workers, of all of those who are working to defend our common values is crucial in each and every one of these conflicts. Next, we must provide a common response to the great challenges, the 2 wars that are affecting Europe and the Middle East. Russia, indeed, is waging a war in Ukraine for territorial conquest, scorning the most fundamental principles of international life. They are guilty of violating the law, ethics and honour. Nothing that they're doing is in line with the common interest of nations, nor the specific responsibilities that they shoulder within this organisation. The fate of Ukraine is a question of peace and security in Europe and around the world. Because who could still believe that they are protected from their bigger neighbours, the violent neighbours, those avid ones? If we let Russia win this as if nothing happened, no one could do that. It is therefore in our common interest and the common interest of nations that Ukraine be restored in its legitimate rights as soon as possible and that just and lasting peace be built. France will continue to do everything in its power so that Ukraine can hold strong, be out of danger and obtain justice. France will continue to provide it with the equipment that is necessary for its defence, and with its allies and partners that are closest to them, France will support the remarkable resistance of the Ukrainian people and will commit to their lasting security. Let us look for peace. France will join its forces with all of those sincere partners to build solid peace in Ukraine, for Ukraine and for Europe. I know that for many of us, the key issues are elsewhere. There's a long list of forgotten wars, unjust victories, badly negotiated resolutions, or perhaps resolutions that are never implemented. I am not forgetting any of them, even if I can't list them all here. President Tshisekedi, who spoke earlier at this tribune, said that the situation in the Great Lanes, and I will go back to him and President Kagame in a few days, we'll cover that. That is of concern to us as well. And in Armenia, Prime Minister, which France stands strongly shoulder to shoulder with the pressure from Azerbaijan and territorial intentions, the international community must be there so that peace negotiations are successful and so that the internationally recognised borders are preserved. But I know that for a lot of the people here, the essential issue beyond these wars is together, and it's also for us together here in Gaza, where the fate of the Palestinian people is currently present and heavy over all of our debates. On this topic, on such a complex topic, I'd like to say clearly France's position from day one. We condemn strongly the terrorist attack, which was terrible and unprecedented, carried out by Hamas against Israel on the 7th of October. Terrorism is unacceptable, whatever the causes may be, and here we mourn the victims of the Hamas's attack on the 7th of October. They include 48 French citizens. I express my compassion, friendship, to all of those families who have lost children, parents, friends on the 7th of October. We ask also once again and solemnly for the hostages to be released. Amongst them, there are also several French compatriots too. And here I wish to commend the efforts of the United States of America, Egypt and Qatar to achieve this. This remains a priority for us all. Israel, when faced with this terrorist attack, has a legitimate right to protect their own people and to deny Hamas the means of attacking them again. And no one here could have suffered something like the 2nd of October without there being consequences. However, the war that Israel is waging in Gaza has gone on too long. The tens of thousands of civilian victims in Palestine cannot be justified. There is no explanation possible for this. There are too many innocent people who have died, and we mourn them too. And those people who have died are an outrage for humanity and a dangerous source of hatred, resentment, which threatens and will threaten everyone's security, including that of Israel tomorrow. So this war needs to stop, and a ceasefire needs to happen as soon as possible, at the same time as the hostages are released. And humanitarian assistance needs to arrive en masse in Gaza. This is a position that we have held since October 2023, where the resolutions with many of us. Let's hold the first humanitarian. We held a humanitarian conference for Gaza in November 2023 in Gaza. It's now a question of political will, given the destruction of the military capacity of Hamas, and it is imperative that a new page is turned in Gaza for the guns to be silent, for humanitarian workers to return, and for civilians to finally be protected. France will participate in any initiatives that will save lives and would allow for everyone's safety to be protected. The deployment of an international mission must open the way for the implementation of the two-state solution. It is up to the Security Council to take a position on this. And also, without further ado, the necessary provisions need to be taken to preserve the link between Gaza and the West Bank, to restore Palestinian Authority and its functions, and also to ensure the reconstruction of the territory, and to once again make life possible, quite simply. France will ensure everything can be done so that Palestinian people can finally have a state side by side with Israel. The conditions for just and lasting peace are well known. We just need to open the way for this, and the path towards this must be as short as possible. France will therefore is committed to the two-state solution and will renew its action so finally it can benefit the people and meet their legitimate aspirations. A Palestinian state should be created, given all the necessary guarantees, security guarantees for Israel. So we should build the reciprocal recognition and common security guarantees for all in the region. And we'll be working on this over the next weeks with Israelis and Palestinians, with all our regional and international partners as well. And at this time, at the moment, the main risk is that of an escalation. I extend my brotherly thoughts to Lebanon and the Lebanese people. Hezbollah, for too long, has been running an untenable risk of dragging Lebanon into a war. Israel cannot, without consequence, just expand its operations to Lebanon. France demands that everyone respect their obligations along the blue line. We will therefore act to ensure a diplomatic voice can be heard, a voice that is indispensable for sparing civilians and preventing a regional conflagration. We cannot have a war in Lebanon. There cannot be a war in Lebanon. This is why we urge Israel to cease this escalation in Lebanon, and we urge Hezbollah to cease the missile launches to Israel. We urge all of those who provide them with the means to do so to stop doing so. We have asked for the Security Council to meet today, indeed, to this end. And I welcome this. And the French minister at this end of the week will head to Lebanon themselves. It's the same unity that we must show when faced with the great regional challenges and the global challenges before us, because beyond the conflicts that we are seeing, that I've just mentioned, we need together to continue to ensure that sovereignty is respected, everyone's sovereignty. Regional and international solutions need to be built to tackle these challenges. And this is the idea behind the relationship we wish to have with Africa, a new partnership. And that is for what for the last 2 years we've been working to do. France has done a lot over recent years for the African continent. France has done a lot over the last few decades, but more specifically in the Sahel, where the French army have fought successfully against terrorism, side by side with regional and international partners. However, the military coup d'etats in the region have meant that we had to take the necessary conclusions. But Europe and Africa have a shared destiny, which demands a broad partnership, a partnership for peace and security, of which the terms need to be renewed, more training, more equipment, more mutual respect. Also, there's partnerships that is underpinned by economic, energy, sport aspects, as well as cultural, memory aspects. And that's what with Benin, Senegal, Cameroon, Algeria, Morocco, and many other countries. This is what we have been patiently building over recent years, and something we will continue to do. So this is the same philosophy that for the last 6 years we've been embodying in order to build a partnership with the Indo-Pacific region, where France has an ambition to contribute to the respect for international law, without which there'll be no prosperity. In this region, which has seen over recent years much development, a lot of people try to trample on rules and impose their wills by force. France is proposing an alternative not to replace anything, but to give states in the region once again the possibility to choose their partners on a project-by-project basis. French territories in the Indo-Pacific have unique expertise in the fight against climate change, protection of biodiversity, the development of clean energy, or the fight against cross-border threats. And our vocation is this in the region, and it is to cooperate with all on the environment. As you've understood, this partner-based logic is one that seeks to build new balances, to refuse that the world be fragmented, where old rule books are thrown aside. We respect each other. We build the paths towards peace and stability. So beyond that, the challenge that we have is, of course, affected by the conflicts that I mentioned. But we must not lose sight of our multilateral agenda because of all of this, nor should we lose the effectiveness that we've committed to. And having gone through the pandemic, which reminded us so blatantly of the importance of some of these common challenges, we should not forget that we need to bear all of this in mind. And so I believe profoundly that effective multilateralism has never been as necessary as today. It must give results. It must give results for development, fight against inequality, education, healthcare, climate, biodiversity, and technology. On each of these individual pillars, we need unity. And we need also to do everything we can to avoid a divide between the North and the South. And that's exactly the philosophy that we have developed in the Paris Pact for People and Planet that more than 60 states have already joined. Firstly, we need to ensure that never we will push a state to choose between these objectives. Why would the states of the North teach lessons to the states of the South and try and explain to them that they should respect climate and therefore renounce on very economic opportunities? This is something we didn't do 20, 30 years ago. It would be unacceptable. Therefore, we need to build an agenda that allows, at the same time, progress to be made in the fight against inequality and for social development, for education, for climate and biodiversity, and global health. Then, solutions need to be made, and these solutions need to be based on the proposals of the states themselves. And this is what we, for example, started to do with our partnerships for a just energy transition. Not having one size-fits-all solution for all from capitals where we go to inspect countries and ask them to all follow exactly the same recipe. Each country has their own path. That is the key to sovereignty. Now, then we need a public financing arranging and also leveraging the private sector too. And that meant that this is what allowed us 3 years ago to properly support the IMF's special drawing rights and to obtain the reallocation of more than 100 billion special drawing rights for the benefit of the countries who need that most urgently, particularly in Africa. This was a silent revolution, but it was crucial. And this is why, with this pact, and we were here with his members here on the effective authority of President Macky Sall and with the support of the United Nations, of the OECD, and organisations concerned, this is why we wish to pursue these reforms and carry out far-reaching reform of multilateral banks, of our financial institutions. We launched this objective for shared financing, bringing together development banks from across the world, including those whose agendas aren't quite aligned. We need to work on this common financing agenda so that we can meet the objectives that I mentioned. And we together, and I hope in the months to come, as soon as then, we will be able to carry out this reform of the World Bank and the IMF, firstly to renew its membership. These institutions were built at a time when many of you weren't independent. So the structure of capital needs to be restructured to make it stronger. The World Bank and the IMF were only conceived, balanced, calibrated at a time when the challenges were very different, when the global economy wasn't as big, where the population was completely different. So we need to lift these absurd taboos of blockages caused sometimes by the biggest countries, which are prevent others from receiving money because they could be diluted. We need to give the capacity to act to these institutions so that they can then fund that countries of the South need. And this reform is of imperious necessity for our credibility as a whole. And I'm saying to all of the richest countries and those who are around us on the table, if you decide not to do that, well, you'll see in the next few years, you'll see an alternative order emerge. They will forget your agenda. If you decide not to do this, and then we will be accused of cynicism and hegemony, and perhaps not wrongly. This reform of financial multilateralism is indispensable to address these challenges. We also need to pursue our climate biodiversity agendas too. We have upcoming COPs, very important, all of them, and France will play its part, particularly with Costa Rica convening for the United Nations an important meeting for oceans in Nice in June 2025. Here we'll have the UN Oceans Conference, and we will continue work on this. And I hope that a lot of you here will be able to ratify what we've managed to achieve over recent years, particularly the Treaty on the Protection of the High Seas. This is crucial. And we're also continuing to make progress on the question of water. That's also indispensable with the new One Planet Summit on water. This is alongside Kazakhstan and Saudi Arabia. I won't go into detail, of course, on all of the topics that are necessary, but I do wish to recall that how pressing an issue artificial intelligence is. It's important for all states here to coordinate on this. We need to foster innovation, of course. We need to ensure that the innovation and artificial intelligence need to make sure it's accessible to all peoples and countries of the planet, and so it doesn't fuel more division and inequality. But we also need all of this to be developed within an ethical, democratic framework created by the peoples of the planet that is resolute. We cannot let some people, a few private actors who are on the cutting edge of this innovation at the moment, think about the future of this for our peoples. This is why France, in February 2025, will convene the next Action Summit for Artificial Intelligence. But I'm sure you've understood the aim is to build this common framework, and I welcome the work that's been done and coordinated by the Secretary General and the Global Digital Compact, which is built using the best of expertise, and it enshrines this philosophy which we subscribe to totally. To conclude, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm aware, of course, that I've forgotten so many difficult situations, from Venezuela to the heart of Africa, and so many other tensions in Oceania. I want to talk about our institutions. I hear a lot of people say that what we need to do to the UN is just throw it in the bin. There's no point in it. We can't resolve conflicts. Why do we have it? So here, let's show a constructive kind of impatience. And we can't just be satisfied with not being able to resolve things. But we know who's responsible. While we have a Security Council that is blocked reciprocally according to each another's interests, while that's still the case, we won't be able to make progress. Is there a better system? I don't think so. So let's make the UN more efficient. Firstly, perhaps making them more representative. And that's why France, as I reiterate here, is in favour of the Security Council being expanded. Germany, Japan, India, Brazil should be permanent members, much like two countries that Africa will decide to represent them. These new elected members will also need to be accepted. But the reform of the composition of the Security Council is not sufficient alone to make it more effective. And so I wish this reform how it should also change the working methods to limit the right of veto in case of mass crimes, and also to focus on operational effective decisions that peacekeeping needs and maintaining international peace and security needs, rather. This is why we need to be brave and audacious and to do so. And with the current permanent members, this is something we should be doing. Almost 25 years after the Millennium Summit, it is now high time to be more effective, to act better on the ground for states and for civil society. And then beyond the United Nations, we must also mark a new era in each of our multilateral institutions, as I just mentioned. These are the few words I wanted to share with you, ladies and gentlemen, today. At a grave time, of our world order. Here, where so many conflicts seem unresolvable, I will say that France will continue to carry this voice that is loyal to its values, that is demanding, that refuses to oversimplify the context, and that France will continue to defend the simple values principles that we've always defended. Human dignity, the respect for the principles of the Charter, and beyond conflicts and the current news cycle, we continue to build with you a fairer and more effective international order. This is what we will continue to advocate for alongside our friends and our allies. But also, we should be free to say no sometimes. We should sometimes be able to refuse the cynicism of the time, also things that seem obvious but are not. Thank you very much for your attention.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the French Republic. We have heard the last speaker in the general debate for this meeting.